excited to learn some.
Sorry.
There we go. No, you're all good. Thanks for remembering. I'm excited to learn some things as well. We have a few presenters today, starting with Jen Mohler from the Gallatin Invasive Species Alliance, Danielle Jones from the Gallatin Weed District, and then hopefully Liz Lodman will be joining us if she's not online at some point, and she'll be speaking about exotic invasive species. She's from the Montana Invasive Species. Lots of long names and acronyms to cover there. So we have our lovely experts here to cover topics like threats and management techniques for these invasive species, for noxious weeds, and then, like I said, aquatic invasive species, which is super important, especially with the recreating that's been going on over the summer. So a lot of you guys have pizza. I'd ask that if you want to get more, we wait until one of the presentations has ended, so we're not getting up in between the speakers. We have the bathrooms down the hallway to the left. If you need to use that at any time. Yeah, I'm going to send the agenda to those on Zoom here just in a minute. So if you want to follow along with some of the topics there, you can. And yeah, I think that's all it. We have agendas and then a sign-in sheet in the front, which I see lots of you already took advantage of. So if you haven't signed in, you can sign in at the end, just like after everyone came. All right, I think we're going to get started now.
Thank you.
Love to do this. Okay, we're gonna start with Danielle. You over there? I'll get her.
So my name is Danielle Jones. I'm with the Gallatin County Weed District. So we are a government county agency. Our mission is we just try to facilitate the management of noxious weeds within Gallatin County. So that means we manage county property on the ground. We work with landowners to try to help and give advice. And then we also partner with other agencies to kind of work on larger scale projects about noxious weeds.
I'm getting you pulled up.
Okay.
Here we go.
So I'm going to just talk a little bit today about why we care about noxious weeds, what they are, and what we can all do to manage them. Okay. So first of all, what are noxious weeds? And I'm going to read you the legal definition of them. So it's any non-native plant that renders the land unfit for agriculture, forestry,
Oh, right. I forgot you were the one sharing your screen.
Sorry.
I should have looked at it.
or that harm native plant communities. So this is the legal definition, and just kind of pointing out rendering land unfit, causing harm. So these are the non-native plants that have been identified to be really problematic. They're kind of the worst of all of the weeds that we have out there. And so they have this special designation in the state. And there are about 40 species of invasive plants in Gallatin County that are on that list. Some of those are state listed, 36 of them are statewide, and then 4 of them we as a county have added because they're special problems in our county. But about 15 of those species are pretty common here. And so what I'm going to do is throughout this slideshow, I'm going to have some pictures of kind of the more common ones that we have in the county. They're not the only ones, but these are the ones that you probably see on a daily basis at this time here. And we'll talk a little bit about them and kind of, so you can see pictures of them through there. So first of all, I'm going to start with this one, Canada thistle. I hope you guys can see that okay, because this is one that I think this is like probably the weed that everybody knows because we've got it everywhere. Right now, it's got the big fluffy seed heads on it. Very, very common, one of the most common. So everybody probably knows what that was. Oxeye daisy is one that I think a lot of people don't even know it's a weed because it's a very pretty daisy. And it is very common in a lot of areas. You see it in hay fields, you see it down in the canyon. But this one is, yeah, it's a weed. It's a really pretty flower, but it's a weed. And then common tansy is one we're starting to see right now. It's got a little yellow button flower. I mean, it's flowering right now. So it's kind of a later one. So it's one that, that's also very common, a lot of times along waterways, things like that. So that's 3 of them. And then, let's go to the next slide. So I mentioned that this was like a legal description of noxious weeds. So yeah, there is a state law on the books that says, called the County Noxious Weed Control Act, that says that people do need to manage noxious weeds if they have them on their property. So the language is, it's unlawful for a person to let them go to seed, except for if they're implementing a weed management plan, which means it's not against the law to have weeds. Everybody has weeds because they're very hard to do. But if you have a plan you're following, then you're on the right track for that. So again, here's some more of our common ones. Coreolithum. This is a very common one in our county, especially. Ice disturbed areas, you'll see it growing along driveway, maybe along gravel roadsides. And it's a tough one. It flowers for a very long period of time, feeds prolifically. Hound's tongue, that one that has sticky burrs, gets all over your pants, gets all over your dog. When you go hiking, it's got pretty purple flowers. And then spotted knapweed, another super common one that you can see on dry hillsides, very many places. It's a huge one in Gallatin County. Okay, next slide. So I said we have a law. So we've had laws on the books about noxious weeds in Montana since the 1890s. So that's a few years after statehood even. So this has been a big concern for the state for a really long time. And so why do we care so much about noxious weeds? So they have the ability to invade places, take over places, and they're just really hard to get rid of once they are established. And so that has impacts to our agriculture, to our natural area. So for example, you have your rangeland, it's infested with something like spotted knapweed, and it diminishes the amount of forage we have for our cows to eat. It takes over native natural habitats, outcompete their native plants. And then in turn, the wildlife that we have that depend on these plants, they don't have the habitat that we need. So it's these impacts to our state is why we care so much. And you can see those impacts on the landscape of your own property as well. You have your desirable plants being outcompeted by noxious weeds because they'll take over a site. Many of them are poisonous. So if you have animals, if you have livestock, you're concerned about them possibly eating noxious weeds as well. They can create a habitat for wildlife. I know a lot of people, like to have habitat on their property and enhance it for wildlife. But I remember talking to one man once who said, he had this nice elk that would come through every year, and then he had this St. John's wort took over in a certain area. He said they didn't use that area anymore. And that was kind of one of the reasons why he was concerned. He really felt like it was because it was limiting or was degrading the habitat. And then it'll only get worse if we don't manage it. We can't ignore them, they'll just get worse, and then they're going to spread. So they're going to spread to your neighbors, they're going to spread farther distances, they'll stick to your tires, they'll stick to your pets. So those are kind of the reasons why, we care about weeds, our own property, and, so that we're not a seed source to create problems on a larger scale. So how do we manage weeds on your property? It can be a very frustrating process because it's overwhelming. There's a lot of information. And so when people get frustrated, they might have a tendency trying to give up. So I just want to talk about the basic maybe steps that you can take to try to ensure that you might have a more effective weed management on your landscape that you're concerned about. So, first of all, identifying the noxious weeds on your property, because every weed is different. And then you need to use that. You learn about the weeds and then you use that information to make your plan. You think about tools that you want to use, you think about timing, you think about your goals, and then you want to then an annual follow through with your plan. So then again, so I'll talk a little bit more about those. So these three, here's another, these are more common ones. Field bindweed. If you have a lawn, you probably have this because it's the little white morning glory flower that climbs up everything. White top, that's one of our earlier flowers. We actually have a lot of it, but it's much earlier in the season, May and June. You see kind of like a field of white, patch of white out somewhere. Could be white top, and that's it. There's a lot of it. People don't notice it quite so much because it is earlier. And then leafy spurge is one that we also have quite a bit of. It's one of our toughest ones. There aren't a lot of good tools to fight it. It's very prolific. It's got characteristics that make it tough. So that's another one that we see a lot of times along. Okay, next slide, please. And so the first step is you want to identify your weeds that you have on your property. So what they say when you go into battle, you gotta know thy enemy, just like Calvin does. So I mean, first of all, is this a plant that I even need to worry about? You know, just because you have a plant, it seems like it's growing really well and taking over, do you need to worry about it? It's, you know, it could be a native plant. It could be one that doesn't really cause problems for you, might not last a long time, it might come in. So just if you know what it is, you have a better idea of, you know, do I even need to worry about this, so that you're not spending much time and effort trying to manage a plant that really isn't going to cause problems. And then how do you identify? It's hard to do, you know. You get a lot of calls from people who say, you know, I have these weeds, and I said, well, you know, it's noxious. They just don't really know where to begin even, because it's tricky. There's so many plants out there that look like weeds, and do we need to worry about them? So, you know, I brought a bunch of weed ID guides that have just our noxious weed state listed one. Anybody's welcome to grab them, but that's useful. Look through there and say, does it look like any of them? I think there's a lot of really great plant ID apps. I'm not an app person, so I can't really speak too much about that, but I know there are some good resources where people outline some good apps that you can use if you want to use that to identify them. Or, you know, you can take pictures and email them to us. We're happy to look at any plant. Or you can samples into our office if you want help for that as well. And we don't know, then Extension has a great lab where we can send things off a bit better. So there are tools where if you can't figure it out yourself, you can come to us and we'll help you, because that is such an important part of any man. That's the first question: what do you have? And you have to know that if we're going to try to help with the plan. Because once you know what you have, then you can identify the traits that are going to inform your plan that you have. And the most important things to look for would be like the structural characteristics. So you know your plant, what kind of root system does it have? Does it have root? Does it have a creeping root system underground? Because those sorts of things matter when you think about how you're going to try to fight it. How long does it live? Is it a perennial where it's going to come back every year and set seed every year? Or is it a biennial where grows seedling the first year, goes dormant over the winter, comes back the next year, puts up the flower, and then it dies? And these are the two that I talk about. Most of our noxious weeds are these two. There's the annual life cycle as well, where they complete their life cycle in one season. But there's only one weed on the list that's actually most of them are longer lived than that. And then how does it spread? Does it spread by seed, or does it spread by the root system as well? Because those are things you're going to have to think about. Next slide. So, for example, but you know you have a thistle in your yard, but you don't know what it is. So there's two noxious weed thistles that are pretty common: Canada thistle and musk thistle. This one's Canada thistle. We talked a little bit about that one already. Musk thistle, they're really common down here in Manhattan. It's the one that has a bright purple flower. It's kind of more sturdy and branchy than the Canada thistle. Next slide, please. So Canada thistle, this is the root system of a Canada thistle. So this is just a couple years old. So they really have a really extensive root system underground that they're drawing from. versus musk thistle has a taproot, so it's more like a carrot that grows that way. It doesn't have that creeping root system. The next slide. And then lastly, they both have these fluffy seeds that everybody's probably seen. Musk thistle seed is the only way it spreads. It doesn't spread by its root system. It's just that taproot. And it's a biennial, so after it flowers, it's out. Canada thistle also has that seed, but it also can spread and send up shoots from this root system.
Even after you cut them down?
Yes.
Oh, wait.
It'll just keep doing that. And so that's important to think about when you're trying to think of how you're going to manage something. And it has seeds as well, so it goes by 2 ways. And it'll come back every year. It's a perennial. It'll just keep coming back. Okay, next slide, please. And so you have your information, you know what you've got, you know what you are worried about, what you're not worried about. So now you need to think about your goals first of all. So why are you managing them? You want to get rid of them? You want to try to cut, reduce those populations as much as possible? Or do you just kind of want to make your neighbors happy and, cut the seed heads off? You're okay with them being there, just kind of your neighbor's not happy. Something. So you got to think about why you're managing them when you first start to think about how you're going to. And then what are your end results? So do you have a horse pasture that you just want to grow really good grass in and you want to get rid of the weeds? Do you have a natural area where you just kind of want to get rid of the weeds? Are you trying to enhance the native plant on your property? So all of those things about kind of what you would like to see coming from your management are good things to consider at first. And then you want to establish just realistic timelines. I think people get really frustrated. It takes more than one season of management. It takes many and many. So just knowing that takes a long time and not getting frustrated with giving up. So just be really realistic about that. Okay, next slide, please. And so now that you know what you have, you want to try to choose the correct tools that for your situation to be most effective. So there's a lot of different options for managing things you can do to manage your weeds. First of all, digging or pulling them. And that's great for the taprooted plants, like musk thistle. If you have a really good pair of gloves, you can get that plant. You can kill that plant by digging. Canada thistle, that's a whole nother situation. You can pull it off at the ground and it's going to come back. So again, knowing what you have when you're thinking about the tools that you want to use so that you don't pull your hair out in frustration. You can only handle this for 10 years and it just keeps going back. And it works well with smaller infestations too. Almost any, I think you can manage with pulling if it's just a couple of plants. You can mow it. So like I said, if you just want to keep your neighbors happy, you want to cut off the seed heads, you can do that with mowing as long as you get the timing right and you do it many times throughout the season. It's not going to kill the plants though. So you're going to have to be happy with living with those plants forever, depending on what they are. But you definitely can deplete them, but you're probably not going to get rid of them. But if that matches with your goals, that's a good tool. And it's going to reduce the seed production anyway. So that's a houndstone. That's the root of the houndstone plant. Also, it's got a taproot. So that's one. You can dig it up. If you don't have too much of it, even if you have a lot of it, if you have a lot of energy, you could tackle it at it. Okay, next slide.
So if you don't get all of the taproot out, will it still grow from that?
I think if you get a good part of the top of it, there's a good chance you'll kill it. But you get as much as you can. I always have a shovel.
Yeah.
I always have a shovel to help me, to do it because it is hard to get it to pull it out. Okay, so some more tools you can spray with herbicide, and sometimes that works better if you have a rhizomatous plant like a Canada thistle, a leafy spurge. Sometimes that's the only way to really tackle them if you do want to try to get rid of it. And if you have a really large infestation, even if it's a taprooted plant or something, sometimes herbicide is your best route. Again, it's all up to you though. A lot of people don't like to use herbicide. So if you don't, then you kind of think about other tools that you can use and the realistic goals when you're using those tools. The important things to remember about herbicide is you gotta use the right thing, because every weed is different. And so different weeds are susceptible to different herbicides. So you really need to do your homework in that way, use the right thing and use the right amount. Because when we talk to people who spray, if they're not getting results, it's usually because they're not using the right thing, they're not using the right amount, and they're doing it wrong time. So those are super important to think about as a part of the plan. It's not just getting out there and spraying it. You can introduce biological control. There's two different types. There's the insects that feed on the plants and cause harm to them. That they've developed, so that you're limited to a certain number of species, and not all species of noxious weeds have biocontrols. It works only on really large infestation because the patch needs to sustain the insect at the same time, and you're not going to get rid of them. You'll just stress them, keep them from growing, but it is an option for areas that are hard to manage. And then there's grazing, goat grazing, sheep grazing, and that's just something that, again, it doesn't usually get rid of the plant, but it'll stress it sometimes if you do it correctly. And then revegetation can be a really important part of management as well. If you have an area that's heavily disturbed, it doesn't have a good plant, desirable plant community that's going to come back once you get rid of the weeds, because you can get rid of the weeds, but you need to have plants to fill in. And so that's a part of what we call integrated management. And that's really all of these tools really using an integrated management way. You're using more than one tool. Revegetation to help fill in spots, to keep weeds from coming back. If you're using biocontrol, a lot of people will spray the edges to keep it from spreading, but then use the bug to really control the population. So that if you use many tools at once, it's usually your most effective in that. Next slide, please. And then I'll say just to consider time, which is so important. You want to manage your weeds before they flower and go to seed. Ideally. So this is Hannah thistle again. In the buds, it just got those buds on it. That's the perfect time to be managing it. Next slide. You don't want it to be looking like that, because you pull, even if you're mowing it, it's gone to seed, it's done damage. You're spraying it, it's gone into dormancy. It's not taking that herbicide in anymore. So timing is just very important. So we always recommend if you're spraying it, you do it when got those buds right before they open. So now is what kind of this looks like now. We're not recommending people spray it now. And then also for pulling it, once it gets to that point, it's already done damage. And if it's for example, musk thistle, once musk thistle looks like this, probably don't want to waste your time. Already got seeds, it's gonna die anyway. And so timing is just really crucial. And then if you are going to spray or thinking about spraying, fall is a really good time for some species, like the ones that have these root systems. They come back to life in the fall. They are trying to bring nutrients down into their roots to get through the winter. So they will also take herbicide in at that time. So some people swear by it for Canada thistle, leafy spurge. It's a great thing to think about, at least if you are really trying to tackle a hard problem.
How about vine?
I don't know if bindweed really does a lot of regrowing in the fall. I haven't heard that much about them. I would say if you see if it's actively growing, that usually means it will take the herbicide again. But it is, a lot of plants are dormant. So we usually say maybe wait until the nights start to get cooler, start to get fall rain, and then they will really start to grow and get ready for the winter. And then also a lot of them will germinate in the fall as well. So if you are out spraying looking for any regrowth, you can look for those little rosette seedlings on the ground too. And then that will get you a head start for next spring. You're gonna have your plants spring. Tackle. So this is musk thistle. You'll see rosettes, spotted knapweed, and then house. You know, they're all German.
Can I ask for a perspective on the left-hand picture and the so and the rhizomatous roots? How deep is that photo in?
You know, I would guess 2 to 3 feet. I'm gonna guess from that, but I don't know. And I think this was about 2 years of growth. So that's like a 2-year-old patch of him. So, and it's gonna depend on your
Soil,
situation.
soil. I saw a really wonderful picture on the internet at Colorado State University, and they had a profile of a man standing there on a side profile like that, showing Canada thistle root system. And in that particular picture, it was 15. So when they talk about application of herbicide for systemic killing the plant under the ground rather than pulling it up, that's why herbicide is for that plant. I tell people it's 80% below ground, 20% above. The root system is that's pretty dense right there.
Okay, slide please. Okay, so then the last thing is to make it happen. And first decision, are you going to do it yourself or are you going to hire somebody to do it for you? If you're pulling it, if you're mowing it, a lot of times people just can manage that themselves. We do have, or we're lucky in Gallatin County to have a lot of great applicators. And so we do have a list in our office. If anybody's interested, we can give a list of all the ones that we know about and kind of go down the list, find somebody that works for you. And then you want to follow through with your plan, you know, at least annually, depending on your situation. But more difficult thing, like if a really bad cancer problem, you might want to think about doing that fall spray and that's week. But you want to do that then for as long as you own the property. Because even if you managing weeds every year, they're never just gonna, you know, the seeds live in the soil for some of them for decades. They're gonna keep coming in from other places. And so it will get easier though over time. You know, it's gonna get easier. And then if you you know, you can change your management over time based on how things change on your certain landscape. Maybe start with spraying because it's so bad, but after a while you're able to manage it with foliage and digging. So you want to think about that, you know, change your plan as your situation changes. Monitor your property, you know, like crazy. Because if you find something new, it's so much easier to tackle it early on before it gets bad. So that's an important part of management as well, is just keeping an eye on your property, see what you have. So here's a couple more. Yellow toe flax, very pretty, another very pretty one. Very common in the southern part of the county. There's also a Dalmatian toe flax, which is another species that would be a little bit more up here. That one's got the good root system. It's another tough one to get rid of. So this one, kind of hard to tell what you're looking at in this picture. It's Betanata, which is actually an invasive grass, new to our to the noxious weed list. But again, Betanata, and it's an annual grass, similar to cheatgrass, but kind of worse. And so it's on the state noxious weed list for that reason. It has the potential to cause a lot of problems in areas. So hard to tell what you're looking at here. It's kind of like a shimmery sort of thing to see on the ground. But that's what this picture is. So this is kind of the next. Okay, slide please. So I kind of went over this plan. Can be really overwhelming, you know, to get started, but seems like when we talk to people, once they get started, they get comfortable with it. And so it's just kind of a hurdle to get over at first. And so we want to help however we can. That's one of our main goals here at the Weed District. We want to help. We want to help people to get started with their plan, help them the most effective one that they can come up with. So, like I said, we do the ID. If you have questions about what you have, you can email us pictures and bring them into the office. We actually will site visits, if you have, if you want us to come out to your property, walk around, take a look at it with you. Kind of assess your situation, see what you have going on, and then help you to get started with your management. We give technical advice about, if you want to spray, we can give you advice about that, because that can be very old. All of the information. We have a rental equipment program if you want to spray, so we have large sprayers that you can rent, and put them back in their truck. We have a weed control cost share program, where people, when they spend money on weed management, whether they're buying herbicides themselves or paying for it, we will help with the cost of that up to $200. It's like a 50% reimbursement of $200. So if you're purchasing to treat noxious weeds, then we do have an application. Like we have an applicator list that we keep that we're happy to send out to people if you want to find somebody to do the work for you. And then last thing on the list, we have weed tips for managing each of the noxious weeds on our website, or I can email them to you. And then, like I said, ID guides. Oh, and here's the last one. Sulfur cinquefoil. This one's tricky. There's a lot of native cinquefoil that looks a lot like, but this one is so much of this year. Really had a good year. It has really yellow flowers. Got like that palmate leaf, kind of like marijuana, some people say, but and then poison hemlock. That's the Gallatin County one. There was a lot of that again this year. It's really that really tall white one that kind of branches, poisonous. You don't want to handle it, especially the root system. And then I also mentioned St. John's. That's another one we see quite a bit of in certain areas of the county as well. Those are the most common that have, but there are others.
What was the poisonous one?
Sorry?
What was the poisonous one?
Poison hemlock. It's tall, white one. It's got like flowers at the top, kind of pretty tall. It has spots on the stems, purple spots. But that is poisonous. Is the name says, but it can be. It's poisonous too. I mean, it just you don't have to worry about it. Just don't handle it without thoughts on. And then this is just contact information. I also have a sheet over there that has just our contact information on it if you want to grab it to go. But yeah, we want to help. Please feel free to reach out to us. Email, you can call, you can stop in, and we're happy to help however.
Areas in our community that require or to or not to.
Well, it's state. So any species that's on that list for the state, so there's 36 of those and 4 in our county. We are, as a landowner, you are required to manage that. Have a plan if you have.
Manage does not mean grow a crop.
All right, well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, if anyone needs pizza or refill, do that while we're holding this up. No, you're good. That works for you. We've seen one that looks so.
I acquired one like that somewhere. Super thin, like.
Is it just going like the same?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
What's the business name?
It's Wheeler's Pizza. They're directly that way. So local Manhattan, they're really good.
I'm feeling less sweaty. Yeah, this is great. Good job. Thanks.
Managing.
So Danielle. Here. No.
Is their office in Bozeman? In Bozeman.
Okay.
But they work.
Is that this one?
All right, stay on schedule. No, you're okay. Some people are still getting their pizza, but I think we can take it away, Jen. Thank you.
So, hi, everyone. I'm Jen Mohler with Gallatin Invasive Species Alliance. We're a nonprofit. We focus our work in Big Sky and Gallatin County. And we are very lucky because we're closely with Danielle, Mike, and John at the County Lead District. They're on my board. So I'm kind of a little underling under the Gallatin County Lead District. And I'm going to talk about managing the plants in your landscape to better the world around you. Go for the next slide. I love pictures, so I have a lot of slides. I'm sorry. So our mission is to protect natural resources from the threats of invasive species, and the threat is real. Next slide. We have multiple programs, a clean recreation program, which Liz is going to talk about clean drain dry, but also play, clean, go. So basically everything we do impacts our environment, and everything we do can spread seeds, weed seeds, and aquatic invasive species. We have an invasive species education program. We have a wonderful native demonstration garden up in Big Sky called Grail Gardens, free and open to the public 7 days a week during daylight hours. Landowner stewardship program. So we do free site visits in the canyon and Big Sky, and a wildlife habitat program. Okay, so why care about plants? So before we settled America, there were 18,000 plant species native to North America. And then we came over from Europe. And since then, we have brought over 30,000 species. So you had 18, and we dumped 30,000 on top of that, non-native species. Of that, 5,000 have escaped cultivation. So like oxeye daisy, we planted it, jumps out of the yard and climbs up the mountain. 500 have been found to be invasive, roughly. And as Danielle, we have mentioned, we have 35 state listed, and then each county has their own list of noxious weeds. And so when you really think about it, when you have 18,000, you introduce 30,000, it's kind of has the impact kind of on the scale of climate change. It's a massive change in our ecosystem. All right, next slide. And why does it matter? So Yellowstone National Park considers invasive species the second biggest threat behind climate change. And a 2019 study found that the introduction of invasive species is the primary cause of plant and animal extinction over the past 500 years. And those invasive species can be plant, animal, etc., bacteria, all that. But it has a massive impact on our planet. Next slide. So some terminology. Native species. It co-evolved with other species in Montana for thousands and thousands of years. So it's native to Montana. It thrives in our climate, in our soils, in our precipitation. Non-native species, the opposite of native. But typically they're introduced with human help intentionally or unintentionally. So yellow toadflax, its cousin Dalmatian toadflax, was introduced into Mammoth in Yellowstone National Park, into the gardens to be flowers for their table settings. And if you go there the right time of year, all you see is Dalmatian toadflax all over the hills. So sometimes we're our worst enemies and we introduce things that shouldn't be there.
So again, it introduced species intentionally, accidentally to a new place, or new habitat where it's not previously found. So, okay, native, we've got our state flower, bitter roots, non-native, alfalfa. Now, the non-native species doesn't have, you don't assign a value to it. It's just non-native. Is it good or bad? Alfalfa, good for my horses. Check on that. But maybe it's not good. So next up is naturalized species. It's non-native, but it doesn't kind of cross an ecological threshold of being competitive, difficult to control, damages the site, and dominates. It's not native, but it's everywhere. And for example, that's smooth brome. It's a non-native grass. We brought it over because it makes great hay, great feed for cows and horses. I have lots in my pastures, and I'm a native plant lover, but I'm not going to try to get rid of smooth brome because it's awesome for horse grazing. Invasive, these are the bully plants of the world. So just kind of thinking plants here. For example, houndstone. It's a noxious weed in Gallatin County. It's toxic. So for me, with horses, I'm especially concerned. It causes permanent and irreversible liver damage to horses. So for me, it's a zero tolerance plants. You know, they're not native. They can move into healthy ecosystems, take over. They're competitive, adaptive, and persistent. So when noxious weeds win, everything else moves. Plants, insects, animals, birds, everything. Next slide. So then we have the categories of weeds. So what is a weed? A plant out of place. Corn is a weed in my flower garden. Flowers are a weed in my horse pasture. Then you have the difference between a nuisance and noxious weed. So noxious, it's competitive, adaptive, persistent. Experts have seen it causes ecological harm. Nuisance weeds, with those, I usually go, how interesting. Why are they here? Dandelions, well, they love lawns. And for me, I don't care at all. I luckily don't have neighbors close by. My horses eat in my yard and they eat my dandelions. It's nutritious, so I don't care. And a lot of nuisance weeds, and we have some tonight, we'll talk maybe at the end. But a lot of times I go, how interesting, why are you here? Is it because I have disturbed an area? And some of these nuisance weeds are pioneer species and are acting a little bit like nature's scab. So they have a role to play in the healing of that disturbance. Sometimes they're very good at being nuisance, like curly dock. I treat it as noxious. I have zero tolerance for it. I don't let it get a foothold. But for example, the prostrate knotweed that someone brought in today, it's my favorite driveway weed. It covers my gravel, so it kind of reduces the heat reflection. Birds love the seed. So in the winter, I just see them scratch all the time and eat the seed, and horses love to eat it. So for me, that nuisance weed is a win-win. All right, next slide. And if you've ever heard of Dr. Doug Tony, Nature's Best Hope, a wonderful book, invasive plants are ecological tumors that will leave your yard. They absolutely will, and they'll spread to your neighbors. So that, as you can see, it's knocking on the door. Next slide, please. They're habitat transformers. They truly move into places, and studies have shown when they move in, especially spotted knapweed, and that's what this is around the snowy elk will leave. It takes over, it displaces native plants that they need, especially in winter range. Elk will change their migration patterns, where they winter. Like Danielle said about that one person with St. John's wort, it changes the way they live on the landscape because this is nutritionally void. And they need food to eat, so they will move to where it is. Next slide. And they can kill. So this is burdock. It's not listed as a noxious weed, but boy, do I treat it like it. And if you've ever had a dog with long fur and this gets in there, you hate this weed. It actually traps bats and small songbirds. And our local chapter of the Audubon does a great burdock weed poll every year, or a couple. And you know, it's great to join these weed polls because they're a great opportunity to identify what's out there and get educated on how to manage them. But yeah, I mean, you see this and it doesn't take long to hate it. All right, next slide.
How hard is that?
Very massive taproot. So you cut them back, but like, again, I have horses with long tails and I have furry dogs, so I have zero tolerance and I'll use an herbicide. Some of those with really hardy taproots, yellow sweet clover, curly dock, poison hemlock, I don't bother pulling because and even digging up, because sometimes you create more of a disturbance than you should. And I will spot treat those. And that way I kill it. Yeah. All right. So why should I care? And I mean, goodness, what other thing can you go out and like be encouraged to kill? For weeks. It's wonderful. Okay. So why should I care? Our native species have little to no defense against these invasive plants, and their impacts can permanently change the ecology of the landscape. And that's what we're really talking about is we're in a climate change or a climate crisis. We're in an extinction crisis. And next slide, I'm going to talk more about this. Okay, but helping the planet can be, okay, I can't fix, climate change all by myself, but you bet I can decide what grows in my landscape, and that can have a profound effect, even on a small scale. Even that quarter-acre, eighth-acre lot, what you put in your landscape matters. Native plants capture carbon, reduce, require less water, and don't need fertilizer. So for the lazy gardener, that rather be hiking than out riding their horses, native plants rock. They still need water, they still need maintenance, but it's reduced. They are the foundation of our food web. Our native plants, evolved to feed our insects, our birds, our elk, which eventually creep up to our grizzly bears. So everything derives its energy from the plants. And when we move in, we raise the landscape and, put down Kentucky bluegrass and put down ornamentals that are not from this landscape and create a food desert. So ditch the lawn and grow wild. All right, next slide. Can we go back just a sec? Yeah. So this is a photo from our native garden. This is sulfur buckwheat, and this is actually a native lady beetle, excuse me. So we have a lot of non-native lady beetles that were introduced, and that is one of the, you always have to think a little bit. You love ladybugs for getting after aphids, but what ladybugs are you introducing to your landscape? The non-native typically. So, pros and cons. Do I really want to introduce more non-native species to control the aphids? Maybe, maybe not. I found that lady beetles will find my aphids. Okay, next slide. Native plants, again, are our foundation of our food web. So if you love elk and you live in a place where elk are abundant, plant fireweed. It is the most nutrient-dense, power-packed energy, digestible energy for elk. They found that when fireweed, moves in after fire, elk have higher reproductive rates, higher calf counts, the calves wean at a higher weight, and they're more successful. So fireweed fuels elk and moose big time. All right, next slide. The other reason, so native plants are the foundation. Well, our native insects, which are the, think of the food web. You have primary producers, secondary consumers, and so on. And what eats plants? But insects. They have 90% of them have developed specialized relationship with certain native plants. They can't adapt to eating other plants. So again, we raise it, we build our house, we put in Kentucky bluegrass, and we throw in ornamentals that are not native to Montana. There is nothing for the insects to eat. And they have shown that those types of landscapes support, say, 1 to 3 species of bird. There's an example in Kansas City, Kansas, like downtown in the city. She had 8-acre lot. She went nuts, planted all natives. She went from 1 to 2 bird species to 27. Mm-hmm. Now she provided food, habitat, water, food, water, nesting areas, and cover. So she had the whole suite of what birds need. You provide it, they will come. So they really need, like this native fritillary on this blanket flower, again at Trail Gardens. Once you plant natives, you get insects you never thought of. You get butterflies that you didn't think of. We did a photography workshop at Trail Gardens, and the gentleman who took that lady beetle Suffolk buckwheat stayed around, and he said within 20 minutes he identified 35 different insects on the flowers. And that's just in 20 minutes.
Hmm.
Unreal. All right, next slide. So insects, again, they're very specialized and their caterpillars are even more specialized. Between 0 to 2% of plants encountered host these insects. So the famous one is milkweed and the monarch. And so that's the only thing monarchs can raise their babies on, our milkweed. So we need milkweed very badly. And just also, as you go out and purchase plants, make sure they have not been treated with systemic herbicide or pesticides. And so buying more local plants from reputable sources is a good thing because, and not to bash the big boxes, but in general, they buy from larger places that use systemic pesticides in there that can impact monarchs. So rebuilding our food web, addressing our extinction crisis starts with plants. Plant choice matters. Next slide. I love this series of kingbirds. This cute little mama is just going to stuff that insect down that baby's throat. So in the past 50 years, North America has lost more than 1 in 4 birds. And insect populations have declined 75%. Why? Because we have changed the landscape from native plants to non-native. They just don't have the food. So if you love birds, start planting native plants. All right, next slide. Native plants, again, are the foundation of functioning ecosystems. They rebuild the food webs. And for birds, what they feed their babies are caterpillars. Not berries or seeds, but they need these little soft little packages of sausages that they can cram down their, babies' bellies and grow. So we got to rethink. There's a great saying: if something's not eating your plants aren't part of the ecology and part of the landscape. So accept some damage to your plants. Accept lots of caterpillars crawling all over the place because you know what? That's somebody's food. Next slide. And I love this picture of the yellow-rumped warbler. It's a big sky local for sure. And it eats larvae, leaf beetles, bark beetles, weevils, ants, scale insects, aphids, grasshoppers, caddisflies, crane flies, gnats, as well as spiders. They also eat spruce budworm, a serious forest pest during outbreaks. So your pest is her food. So again, we kind of have to change our perspective on, our garden is a living thing. Whether it's a vegetable garden or a wildflower garden or whatever, accepting some damage to our plants means we have beautiful birds like this. And it does move up that, food chain because, again, it all starts with plants. All right, next slide. So we need a paradigm shift. This needs to be the past. This is a water sucker. And pretty soon, California is turned off the tap. Nevada, it's they no longer allow people to have lawns. In fact, they're ripping all of it out. And the time is coming for us. So let's be proactive, shrink your lawn, grow more food for wildlife. It's amazing. And to be honest, I would rather, do a little wildflower, gardening than push a lawnmower any day. And this needs to be the future. And you can do amazing things with our native plants. They are so beautiful. The diversity is stunning. And once you get hooked, one of the joyful things, you grow out your garden, you go out for a hike, and you know all the wildflowers and impress your friends. And instead of saying, "Hey bear," I just shout out the names of the plants. All right, next slide. So, Landscape for Ecological Function. I mentioned Dr. Doug Tallamy. Nature's Best Hope is a phenomenal book. If you have not read it, I even get goosebumps thinking about it. A lot of people, we're Gallatin invasive species. Why do you do what you do? And it took me forever to be able to really convey why I hate weeds so much and why it matters to manage them. I read this book and I'm like, well, that's it. Because plants are the foundation of our ecosystems. And when invasives move in, our natives lose. And, again, I can't fix everything everywhere. I can't, reduce carbon emissions for the United States, but I can absolutely control what's growing in my property. And it can feel so rewarding to have butterflies you've never had before come into your property and bird species you've never had. It's a little bummer when, you see stuff eating your flowers, but you're like, hey, that's part of the ecosystem. Cool with that. So landscaping, for landscape for nutrition versus for taste. So our non-native plants do well, are abundant. We sort of culturally accepted that these are the plants we should have, but they're nutritionally like fast food. And we need to feed our local insects and birds and everything. So using native plants is how you do it. When we ignore plant function and garden only for beauty, drain the vitality of local ecosystems. So again, even that quarter acre lot makes a difference. We cannot live on a planet without functioning systems. That's it. All right, next slide. So why garden with native plants? They're adapted to our climate and soil conditions, big time. That, they reduce maintenance. They still require maintenance, but reduced. Less inputs, no fertilizer, little to no supplemental water. The first couple of years, if you start using native plants, you definitely have to water. And there's a great saying you plant native plants, first year they sleep, second year they creep, and third year they leave. So the other thing we have to do with native plants is be a little more patient. We're a culture of instant results. I want my Amazon package today. These native plants take a little while they put energy to develop the roots first, and then they begin to grow their shoots, and then wham, it is amazing. Provides food and habitat for our local pollinators and beneficial insects. And unlike natives, common horticultural plants do not provide the energetic rewards for their visitors and often require insect-like control because they have other pests. So again, why fight nature? Montana said, these are the plants that I'd like to grow. Let's listen to one. All right, and this is another beautiful picture of Crail Garden. You can go ahead. So this is our common thing. We get the, English ivy, native to Europe, highly invasive to the US, crepe myrtle, clematis. We buy all these plants that this is what you should, like these developments, you kind of get the builder package of landscapes. And they're worthless plants. It's an ecological food desert. This is why you don't see the insects and the butterflies and the birds that we all love. Next slide. So just a little terminology as well. So pesticides, a chemical preparation for destroying plant, fungal, or animal pests. So plants, herbicides, fungus, fungicide, insects, insecticide. So it's really important to have that knowledge of difference. Plants sometimes, and we got to stop this practice, are treated with a systemic insecticide. So they come and already loaded with insecticide in there and plant them in the garden, the insects start eating them and they die. And they have found that milkweed, a good proportion of milkweeds have that systemic insecticide. So we all think, oh, this is great, I'm gonna, help the monarchs, and we're end up killing them. And we really, my personal opinion, we need to get rid of those systemics. They're killing us. So again, where you buy your plants, be wise, look at labels, ask questions. Suburban lawns and gardens receive more pesticide applications per acre than agriculture. So, a lot of people are like, oh, they're spraying the wheat fields. And you're like, what are you doing in your lawn? I don't want to use herbicides on the noxious weeds. You're weeding feeding your lawn, and that's more of a danger to your dog than any surgical, appropriate spot treating of noxious weeds. Gas, we all fuel up our cars. It's a known carcinogen. Alcohol, known carcinogen. Red meat, hot coffee, too hot of coffee is a known carcinogen. Herbicides, again, when used properly, the right time on the right, the right herbicide on the specific weed, you can have a very minimal impact for maximum noxious weed kill. And I have seen properties that have been, especially my own, I have horses, that's their, pasture. I want it to be healthy, but when I moved in, it was so overgrazed, it was nothing but weeds. I physically couldn't get to the back end of the pasture. So for the first 3 years, I had broadcast spray my entire property. Each year after that, it got better and better because I shifted the competition from weeds had the upper hand, and each year the grasses got healthier and healthier. Also on that, I learned how to harvest grass properly. Because half of it is getting rid of what you don't want, half of it is cultivating and encouraging what you do want. So I learned how to be a grass farmer. Each year it got better. And now, I mean, the prize was when, I think 5 years ago, my husband said, we need more horses. Yes. But I know better, I won't do that. And all I have for herbicide now is literally kind of a spray bottle the size of our water bottles here of herbicide to get Canada this. That's all I use. I hand pull some. My favorite method is beer in a bucket, except I like travel wine in a bucket. So think carefully about what pesticides you really do use. Always kind of take a step back and why am I using it? What am I trying to manage? Are there other ways? If not, how do I use it? How do I use the right thing on the right plant at the right time? Roundup is used way too much and is especially ineffective against our noxious weeds. They're like, ooh, Roundup, whatever. So be careful with your pesticides.
Not
Use
only
them
that.
appropriately.
Lymphoma, leukemia,
Yeah, and again,
and autism,
and-
also spiked with the increased use of.
yeah, and again, am I, willy-nilly with my herbicides? No. Am I willy-nilly with gas? Heck no. So if you use it appropriately, safely, your risk is minimal. All right, next slide.
Someone online said, what's beer in a bucket?
Ah,
Beer in a bucket.
beer in a bucket, my favorite. I fill up my travel wine glass with the lid. Someone may prefer beer or coffee or tea or whatever your beverage of choice is. You grab your bucket and you just go out and pull. Enjoy your beverage and pull weeds. And I did that a lot with my horses. Like I'd let them out to pasture in the evening and I'd go out there with my bucket and after my horses ate for a while, they'd come over and like, what are you doing? I just hang out and then I get to see how they graze the landscape. I got to know the way that area was always heavily overgrazed or that area always had the most weeds. And so it's a great way to kind of connect with the landscape. And you do a little bit at a time, Danielle talked about it, like it can feel overwhelming. Well, how do you eat an elephant? Just one bite at a time. One of my friends was a guide on, those huge mountains, like Everest and Aconcagua, and he just said, just 1 foot at a time, 1 foot in front of the other. You get little wins and you get motivated and you're like, hey, I got this. And it's addictive because then you see the change in your landscape and it's so rewarding. All right. So the other thing about native plants, there's certain species that really pack a powerful punch in supporting our ecosystems. Keystone species, the glue that holds our ecosystems together. So when I plan my native plantings, I want to make sure that I have certain species that are native to my region. Aspens, cherries, willows, oak, evergreens, goldenrods, asters, and sunflowers. Those are just power packed. They really help the ecosystem. So I really make sure I have a phenomenal variety of these guys. And like, it's just phenomenal. You get to watch all these, flies are an incredible pollinator. And there's hoverflies, there's all sorts of flies. I'm just beginning to learn all these insects. It's phenomenal. All right, next slide. Nature's messy. So again, if something's not eating in your garden's a part of the landscape. So accept it. I cherish it when I see things eaten because I know something's benefiting from it. Celebrate the bites and leaves. Next slide. So I invite everyone to check out Trail Gardens. Again, it's free and open to the public. We designed it so it has flowering plants that bloom throughout the season. So that's also something I do for my landscape. What blooms really early, late spring, early summer, midsummer, late summer, fall, almost into winter. And you create this mosaic of plants that can feed things throughout the fall. The coolest thing, so we built our garden in 2019. And in our second growing season, we had this beautiful white crown sparrow nest in the center of our garden and raise her 4 babies. And it was like the Field of Dreams, build it and they will come. But it was, because a lot of, some people are like, yeah, native plants, whatever. But when I show them, like, look at what happened, they came. Up at Crow Gardens, there's actually an elk herd that will move through in the winter and eat almost everything down for me. So I have very little maintenance in the spring. So again, it's wonderful when your landscape can be part of, or when your garden can be part of the landscape. There's a little rack card back there about Crow Gardens, and then go ahead, next slide. These are some of the pictures from it. We have 43 species. I think I lost a couple species. That happens. You know, gardening, it's trial and error, and it's kind of like, it's like painting, but without the worry about having something permanently on a canvas. It's just so much fun, and it's so addictive. We have little signs so you can find it up there. But it really is sort of just a mosaic of plants. Arrowleaf balsam roots, I love that poster over there. Did you know it takes 7 years before arrowleaf balsam root will bloom? Another pro tip is these natives have extremely deep roots, so don't dig them up and transplant them unless you know that place is going to be built on and it's going to be destroyed anyway. The deep roots, if you dig them up, get a foot, it's like cutting them off at the neck. Sagebrush especially. So it's really great to, you know, get the pollinator program, of course, through the CD, or buy native plants, and just then you can paint how you want. And the rewards a little sooner. But arrowleaf balsam root, I'm year 3. I have 3 leaves. I'll get there. All right, next slide. Okay, so this is our website. We have resources on the back plates, which are pretty much the same resources on Gallatin County weed districts. So we have a weed ID and control page with pictures, and those cheat sheets is how I call them, the management recommendations. And they did an amazing job with, like, here's the biology of the weed. So you click on Canada thistle, you learn it's a perennial, you learn it has creeping rhizomes, yada yada. And then on the back page it talks about how to manage it. And you know, for Canada thistle, I mow throughout the season to prevent flowering, and in the fall, after that first frost, is when I get after that Canada thistle. And I've had very good results. So I'm a big fan of fall treatment for certain weeds. Same thing, we have a help available page with some more things. The county cost share is on there. We're very lucky we have cost share here. Madison County has a cost share too. Some more information, herbicide carryover and manure. So I'm a horse owner. I compost. I buy hay that I know has not been treated with herbicide, because if I feed it to my horses, they poop it out. That manure can be hot for 5 years easily. And I'm a lazy composter. I just kind of pile and I turn occasionally, I water occasionally. It takes me like 4 to 5 years for that to kind of really become beautiful compost. But yeah, I'm very aware of that herbicide carryover and manure. So be very cautious about where you get manure from. Pet safety, again, I have dogs, I have cats, so I'm very cautious. A lot of times, like when we first started, we were like, okay, I'm gonna spray this side, dogs and cats go that way. You know, wait a couple weeks and reverse. Each herbicide has a re-entry restriction, so how soon until you can move in safely. And then I double, triple that for pets, because I don't lick my paws, but they do. And if they happen to run through, just give them a back. Then there's a grazing restriction, so my horses. So if I've sprayed a pasture, I look at that the grazing restriction, and some say 4 hours. I go, great, 2.5 weeks. The reason is because anyone who has horses and vet bills, you know what I'm talking about. And the other reason is, as those plants decay, they can kind of be more palatable to animals when they graze. But really what it's about is that can die, and my grasses have time to rest, become healthier, have more leaf, and then I can graze it. On our good pages, Crow Gardens has lots of information. We have a list of plants that we are growing in our garden, and we have a Grow Wild page that talks all about native gardening. Xeriscaping, water wise, trout friendly, water smart, whatever you want to call it. It's all about planting to match your ecological, your soils, your waters, basically to match Montana. Conservation trees and shrubs. I did a whole shelter belt, and I focused on plant diversity, those that are drought tolerant and native. That was my goal, because I'm kind of one of those people, like, plant it, I'll kind of baby you for a couple of years, but then you gotta earn your keep, buddy. And that helped me a lot. Plants for pollinators, landscaping for birds. The Audubon has an awesome, like, I love it because it's just they have 2 gardens that are just ready. Like, you can just go and, like, here's the shopping list, here's what you do, and Insta garden. It's awesome.
Your county cost share and your site visit, are you only Gallatin Gateway and Big Sky, or do you do the whole county?
Yeah, so I am Big Sky in the Canyon. My territory ends at kind of Spanish Peaks or Spanish Creek, because that's where my funding comes from.
Sure.
But then in Gallatin County, we have Danielle and Mike.
Okay, so it's the same, it's the
Yes,
same, it's
so
not.
we're teams. Yeah,
So we go anywhere in the county, but Jen does.
Yeah.
Well, you said there's $200 limit.
For the-
on that
for the cost share.
That,
And it's ours,
the same.
we promote their cost share.
Gotcha.
And because Big Sky covers Madison and Gallatin, so we have the links to Gallatin County cost share and then Madison.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and we don't manage it, we just, they're set up, they're funded, so we just kind of point them in the right direction.
Okay.
But it's a wonderful way to get started, and I cannot, so that's exactly what I did. I bought 10 acres. It was just a junk show. And I reached out and said, Gallatin County District, oh my God, I need help. I rented their sprayers for a couple years. And it was brilliant because I didn't know what I was doing. So they lined me out with like what herbicide to use, what was the rate. They helped me just dial it in, and I went and sprayed it. Then after I was done, I went to my neighbors. I'm like, look what I got. You want to use it too? Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. That works. All right, so next slide, and I think I'm almost done. I'm sorry, I just love this topic.
That was the last slide.
That's the last slide. Okay. So, any quick questions? And I'm Danielle and I. Well, I know I'm staying around. I think Danielle might too. So we can always like have conversations at the end too.
Yeah,
Any
I
questions?
think
Yes.
we'll
Do
go
that.
to Liz's presentation. I know that we've been having so much fun, so we're getting a little bit close to our 7 o'clock time. But I encourage you all to stay for Liz's presentation. Aquatic invasive species are something that is a completely different ball game than what we've been talking about so far. Of course, those online if you need to jump off at any point, but yeah, so I'm gonna get Liz's presentation.
Don't
up.
jump offline. Stay there.
Stay online if you want to be our biggest fans.
How many people are on this?
6. Actually, I 4, because 2 of them
Where's
are
the
also
camera?
in the room.
Oh.
Right there. The owl.
Oh,
The owl is looking at, the owl is watching. It follows those who speak around the room. It's kind of scary.
Well, while she's getting that together, I will introduce myself. Can you pull up my
Yeah,
slides, I hope?
yeah, there's a.
I'm Liz Lodman. I'm with the Montana Invasive Species Council in Helena. Sorry, I got here a little late. I had a meeting that went a little long, but so glad to be here and share information about weeds of the water. So this is really going to be a different topic. So I'm going to talk about aquatic invasive species, those weeds you might find in the water. I spent a lot of years working for Fish, Wildlife and Parks. The last few working with the Aquatic Invasive Species Program specifically. And then I moved over to the Montana Invasive Species Council, and that's under the NRC. So I'm over to NRC now. Cool. Aquatic
Ready.
invasive species. Oh, I was gonna ask, does anybody here like to go boating? Paddling, doing, okay. Anybody here like to go fishing? Couple people. How about this? You like to wash your clothes, take a shower, flush the toilet, drink water. Okay, so you all should be concerned about aquatic invasive species because this really does impact all of us. We really think about boaters and anglers maybe, mostly. If you're an irrigator, it's a concern. So that's why I'm so glad to be able to share this message with you. Jen did a great job talking about what are invasive species. And something we think about with aquatic invasive species is it invasive? It could be native in one part of the United States, but invasive in another part. It could be native in one part of Montana and invasive in another part, and maybe even on the watershed level. And when we're talking about aquatic invasive species, rather than looking at each specific particular species, we talk about pathways. How do they get moved around? Because if you can stop those pathways, you can prevent a lot of invasive species. So where do they come from? They have come to the United States from all over the world. People are traveling more, especially by, well, plane, they're going to catch that, but it's if you would take the next slide, please. The reason they mostly got here was on big ships. Okay, these big ships that suck in ballast water. Do the next slide. That ballast water they bring into those big cargo ships that helps balance the boat. They have to do that depending on what their load is. So they're sucking water into those fresh water ports, go to their destination, offloading that water or sucking in the water. So it's getting moved around back and forth all the time. And the first recording of aquatic invasive species in North America was in the Great Lakes. When you think about all those big ships that come in through the St. Lawrence Seaway into the Great Lakes and deliver cargo, that's how it got there. So the Great Lakes are a cesspool of aquatic species. There's like 200 some different things. That's plants and animals and pathogens. Next slide. So the number one source of aquatic invasive species moving around in America is on watercraft. So it got there on those big cargo ships, but then the smaller boats go out and play in that water. And I'm going to talk more about clean, drain, dry, but if they've got water still in their boat and then they go to another water body and that water spills out, they just potentially introduced an invasive species. Next slide. Here's the clean, drain, dry. So you guys heard about that. You've seen maybe the watercraft inspection stations that Fish, Wildlife and Parks manages. Clean your boat. Get everything off your boat. Drain it, because some invasive species are so tiny and microscopic you cannot see them with the naked eye. Want to drain all the water out and then dry it. They're aquatic. They need water to survive. So clean, drain, dry is the key. And here, if you guys want to pick up one of these stickers, cleandraindrymt.com takes you straight to the Fish, Wildlife and Parks website, where you can learn more about the rules. If you've got a boat, especially if you've got somebody from out of state coming to Montana with their boat, they have to be inspected. They're going to launch here. They have to buy an AIS prevention pass. We just want to make sure that they're not going to be bringing bad stuff into Montana. Likewise, if you go out of state and are boating somewhere, come back in with your boat, has to be inspected. Make sure you're clean, drain, dry. Next one. Okay, number 2 spread of aquatic invasive species moving around is people dumping aquarium tanks. Get tired of taking care of Goldie the goldfish. You don't want to flush it down the toilet. It's like, I'm going to, do the kind thing and dump my goldfish into the water. Goldfish are one of the hugest problems we have in some of our waterways in North America and some in Montana too, because they're in the carp family and they can get really, really big. Okay, they can keep growing. I know there was a lake in Colorado that had nothing but goldfish and that they just decided they nuked it. They killed everything. They killed all the goldfish to start over because there was no way that other fish could even survive with all the goldfish there. So people dumping aquarium tanks. I have a coworker who used to work in Idaho. He came upon this. That is a fish tank that they cut ice out. They made a hole in the ice. I don't know what they dumped in there, and then they just left their fish tank on the shore, and it's winter. There's snow on the ground. This is flowering rush. So that can get escaped from gardens. And then this is Chinese mystery snail. So there's all kinds of things people can buy to have in their aquarium tanks. They want, the interesting frogs, snails, salamanders, all kinds of fish, some that can survive in our waters and that they can become invasive. Not only that, but you used to be able to get aquatic plants to have in your aquariums. And that's how some of our invasive aquatic plants got into the waters of North America, is people escaped from their aquarium tanks. So we've got the program called Don't Let It Loose. Oh, crayfish. Yeah, don't dump crayfish in the water too. Next slide. Don't Let It Loose is a campaign to educate people to be responsible pet owners. I've got a little sticker back there. There is a really good campaign that we are trying to initiate in Montana for classrooms. So if anybody knows, like grade school, middle school teachers, I work with the Invasive Species Action Network out of Livingston, and they've created a pledge form that a teacher could have in a classroom if they have a pet in the classroom. The teacher and all the students sign it to be responsible pet owners, take proper care of your animal, and to never let it out in the wild. And if you can no longer care for that animal, you're gonna find somebody else who can adopt it. Maybe it could be a nursing home that could take those critters, a daycare, a neighbor, that kind of thing, but to never let those animals loose. It also comes with a rack card with information and a little bookmark for all the kids. So we have those packets for folks, and I wanted to show this one. Oh, maybe go to the next one. Yep, on there. One more. Yeah, so this, we have metal signs that we are distributing to places to put up as a reminder. Don't dump your aquarium pet. I know these are in Gallatin County. They've been put up in some places. Gallatin Pond, I think that could be a spot where people are just dumping, you know. It's usually those urban pond areas where it's really convenient and easy, or like a fishing access site that's close to town. Which one? We have had reports of people seeing, you know, that colored gravel that's in the bottom of. So somebody reported seeing that in a fishing access site on the Missouri River between Hill and Great Falls, and our biologist goes out and checks, and it's like, yeah, it looks like somebody dumped their, who knows what was in that aquarium. So never dump your aquarium. Next slide. Ornamental plants. You have a water garden and you want to bring in some pretty things to your water garden, but just like what we heard from Jen, let's go with native stuff, not stuff that's not native here, because this can escape your water garden and then wreak havoc. So that's probably the third most common way that these invasives get out into our waterways. People bringing things. I'll talk about one. You know, it's pretty, and maybe you came from another state and you want to bring what was in your other state here because you liked it, but you know what? Here, it's invasive. Where you were from, it was okay. Here is going to take over because our native plants just can't compete with it. Next one. Okay, so the impacts of aquatic invasive species. I'm not even going to talk about the aquatic invasive animals, which I could, and I love to talk about. That could be another time. I'm just sticking with the plants. But they all kind of have the same effect. By the way, this is invasive mussels, zebra and quagga mussels you've heard about, attached to a native mussel. We have native mussels, and they can be very big. And these invasive mussels are small. Look what I have in my pocket. There's the invasive mussel. Just my quick lesson about this is invasive mussels attach to things. Our native mussels do not attach to things. They bury their little butts in the bottom of the mud, hang out there and do their job. These things can attach to the bottom of your boat, to docks, to hydropower facilities, inside irrigation systems. That's why they're so bad. They have these little hairs that allows them to attach to stuff under the water. So please don't ever kill our native mussels. They really need help. There's not that many of them, but if it's a mussel that's attached to something, then that's bad. And that's what those watercraft inspectors are looking for. One of the things is those invasive mussels. Okay, on back to plants. Next one. All right, Eurasian water milfoil. We definitely have this in Montana. And I don't get into a lot of ID, and I am not a biologist. But the thing is, if you've got something hanging off your boat, an aquatic plant, pull it off and put it in the trash. Get rid of it. Don't allow it to get moved to another place. I don't expect you to be really good at IDing every single aquatic plant out there. I can't at all. Not only that, go to the next one. There's all kinds of water milfoil in Montana, and some are native, and they look so much alike. You've really got to be trained. I do have the ID guidebook set there, you know, to know the difference. So if you got an aquatic plant hanging on your boat, fishing gear, whatever, just don't move it around, okay? Next one. Fragrant water lily. Huge problem in the Sealy Swan area. Beautiful flower. Who would ever think that's bad, right? It's like some of the other pretty flowers we plant, but this one's bad. We have a native water lily. This isn't it. Somebody brought these up here and they are taking all over in the Sealy Swan area. They have water lily poles. They pull up so much biomass. out of some of those smaller lakes in the Sealy Swan area. It's just amazing. So this is one of the bad ones.
I did a lily pull on Sealy Lake for this and it was super fun. They had drinks and snacks. You're out on the water all day pulling lilies. I think the red stems are the ones that are invasive, but it was really fun. So I recommend you take part.
Just don't move them around. Yeah.
Yes, no,
Flowery
they were.
rush. This has been in Flathead Lake for many, many years. And it is pretty, for a very short time, it's got this really pretty pink flower on it. But it's kind of a, I don't know, reed kind of rush thing. And this is actually a photo from Flathead Lake, how much, monoculture right there. It's all flowering rush. And this tiny picture over here, this poor guy had a house here and he could not get his boat in and out. So he has laid down these big black plastic heavy mats to crush those rushes down so he can get his boat in and out. He's got to cut a path here to get out to the water, but that's what he had to do. So it can really be devastating to property owners, to recreation, to the types of fish that can live there. Some of them can promote mosquito growth, that kind of thing. So flowering rush is bad, and they are trying to figure out what to do with this. One of the projects that's getting funded is bringing in a weevil that will maybe help deal with flowering rush, and that's going to be in a couple of years or whatever. That's brand new biocontrol. Okay, next one. Curly leaf pondweed, another one of those ones that you might have seen in an aquarium tank. We do have this one in Montana as well. You can see when it becomes just a mat, you couldn't boat through that anymore. It's hideous. Next one. This is kind of like on the line. It's really not totally aquatic. It likes to have wet feet, right? So it lives on the edge of the shoreline. But yellow flag iris is an invasive species as well. Next one. So this is the map that Fish and Wildlife Parks puts out every year about where are these species located. So if you can see the key purple and fragrant water lily, that's going to be here around Sealy Lake, Swan Lake, flowering rush, all of Flathead Lake and down Flathead River. Your Asian water milfoil is red. So the good old lucky Clark Fork has both your Asian water milfoil, flowering rush, and I think it's supposed to have curly leaf pondweed over there too. I don't think the line is there, but blue is curly leaf pondweed. Fort Peck Reservoir has your Asian water milfoil. So we've got these plants in our rivers and lakes, not everywhere, but definitely here in Montana. If you are out there wondering if you have a pond or a spot on the river that you're really familiar with, and then all of a sudden, like say near a boat launch area, you're starting to see a new kind of growth there, that might be a cause for concern. If it's something that's not normally been there, you can report that to Fish Wildlife Parks and they'll come take a look. If we can catch that stuff when it's small, we can hopefully take care of it. So Whitefish Lake right now is dealing with, I think it's curly leaf pondweed. And they are putting those big, actually Fish Wildlife Parks is putting these big mats out to crush them down to inhibit their growth. And so seems to be working so far. These plants spread through fragmentation. So hand pulling it, if you don't get it all, you're just gonna spread it more because the fragments float down and you're just creating more. Although some people, they do some hand pulling, so I don't say that's totally bad. I just heard about an invasive, I think it's curly leaf pondweed again, in Haskell Creek, which is out of Whitefish. That's like, where did that come from in this mountain creek? And they've got in a couple spots, very small populations, and so they're trying to deal with that. We had guys out monitoring for invasive species on the Rocky Mountain front, and I want to say it's Nyland Reservoir, closer to the Rocky Mountain front. I might have the name wrong. But they were able to block off the bay where that was with curtains and treat it with a herbicide. So small enough that the water body allows for it, there are things we can use to treat it. There was property donated to the Forest Service. Trying to think, it's up in your neck of the woods, maybe, or the next drainage over, Jennifer. And it was these two, looked like man-made ponds with dams, and they found I think it was Curly Lake Pondweed again in that, and they decided when the Forest Service acquired this land that they were going to get rid of the dams and allow it to drain and dry.
Paradise Valley, I believe.
Paradise Valley,
Yes.
that's where it's at, yeah, yeah. So that was a way that they treated it, was to dry them out, so. There's some things you can do, but really the best thing is prevention. Next one. Oh, that was my last slide, okay. This is not a plant, this is what? A frog. Frog, what kind of?
Pet frog.
Dalmatian.
Bullfrog. This is a bullfrog. So I'm just gonna make a point about invasive species. This is native in eastern United States. Anybody from eastern United States where they have frogs? Not native in the western US, and we have bullfrogs in Montana that people have let go intentionally. There's a population around Billings. There's another population around from the Bitterroot Valley all the way up, making their way up to the south end of Flathead Lake. And these things will eat anything they can put in their mouths. They are eating all the native frogs we have. They will eat baby ducks and fish and other important species we want in our waterways. So,
And they get absolutely gigantic too.
and they get so big. They're the biggest frog, and that's this disc on their side is one of their other identifying features. And yeah, they're really taking a toll. So that's my last slide though. So I just want to remind you, oh,
I mean,
one more. Is there one more slide?
there's like a, oh,
There's a lot.
okay.
I have a slide that's got my email on it. You want to just zip through these? 'Cause I don't-
Yeah, oh, are these your, okay.
So again, fish, wildlife and parks, cleandraindrynt.com. And
Okay,
let's
would you
talk
like
about
to
some of the
do
fun
this?
things I brought here. This is our poster about all the campaigns we work with. So play clean go that Jen was talking about. Don't move firewood. That's a way that pests get to Montana. Don't let it loose. Squeal on pigs, feral swine are knocking at our door from Canada. Clean, drain, dry, and then the Noxious campaign. And then if there's anybody who wants posters or anything, I do have the Don't Let It Loose posters here. This is another fun poster with all kinds of basic pieces on it. And it also comes with a kind of a education curriculum kit that, and some IT guides and other stuff.
I found it.
There it is. Thank you. Yeah, so this is me. Invasivespecies.mt.gov is our website. And again, we deal with all kinds of species. And we work with the agencies who actually deal with that. So Department of Ag does a lot of, and the extension does a lot of weeds. Fish, Wildlife and Parks is aquatic invasive species, and we support those groups. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for coming. If the speakers are planning on sticking around a little bit longer, we can field some questions, but I wanted to say a big thank you to Danielle, Liz, and Jen. This wouldn't have been possible without them. I learned a lot personally, so I hope you all did too. Thank you to those who are online. Didn't forget about you. I feel like I'm just speaking to a void. But yeah, I will be posting the recording of this workshop on our YouTube page, hopefully here within the next week. So if there's anything that you feel like was a little bit fast and you want to go back and rewatch it, you can. The leads left a lot of love and resources, and we usually have a few of those on hand here at the Conservation District too. So if you forget to pick something up or happen to lose one that you grabbed, you usually stop by here, and yeah, we can pass around their contact information and follow-up email. Sure, both of those are probably also on our website. But yeah, another big round of applause for our speakers. If anyone online has a question, you can use the chat feature. And yeah, feel free to take pizza to go. I don't know, how do we do it?
I'm gonna eat pizza.
Yeah. No. But if there's any leftover, feel free to take some. Thanks. From Wheeler's Pizza.
That's kind of new, isn't it, in the last 6 months?
So